Good day, my dear college students. How are you today? So, our next topic in Foundation of Special and Inclusive Education is all about learners with intellectual disability. So, I would like to say thank you to the honor of this presentation, Ma'am Menchi Garachico and Sir Freddy Santos Jr. Let us now proceed with our topic. So, what is the nature of intellectual disability? An intellectual disability, formerly referred to as mental retardation, is characterized by a combination of deficits in both cognitive functioning and adaptive behavior. So mayroong kinalaman sa pag-iisip at sa pag-uugali ng isang bata. The severity of the intellectual disability is determined by the discrepancy between the individual's capability in learning and in the expectations of the social environment. So, the problem is yung ating pag-iisip ay may ano din po sa kapasidad ng isang bata na matuto at ang expectation ng mga nakapaligid sa kanya. Another one, the nature of intellectual disability. For mental retardation, intellectual disability is term used when a person has certain limitations in mental functioning. So take note of the word limitations. Nalilimitahan ang kakayahan niyang mag-isip at ang skills niya sa communication, sa pag-aalaga sa kanyang sarili, even ang social skills. Mayroon silang tendency na nahihiya or hindi sila pwedeng makipag-kaibigan or makisalamuha sa ibang tao. This limitation causes a child to learn and develop more slowly than a typical child. Dahil sa kanyang kalagayan, they tend what? To play alone and not to socialize with others. Then another nature of intellectual disability is the mental retardation or intellectual disability in this DSM-4-TR is an access disorder criteria that includes the intelligence test scores. So the most important is the child may be able to undergo intelligence tests. So kailangan muna before po identifying or letting the child to be identified with learning disability if he or she what undergo intelligence test. And another one is yung adaptive functioning and the age of onset. So what is the definition of intellectual disability? Significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning, mababa po ang kanyang average sa IQ, sa intelligence quotient, existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifested during the developmental period that adversely affects a child's educational performance. So yan po, ano? So another one is nakikita nakikita ito sa kanilang pag-uugali and sa kanilang paglaki. Okay? Wherein this will end or this will result to poor academic performance. Bumababa ang kanilang sa performance level. So another one is another definition by American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, characterized by significant limitations both in intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior, which covers many everyday social and practical skills. The disability originates before the age of 18. Okay. So there are what ang affected is the conceptual skills, the language and literacy, sometimes ang kanilang pagsasalita at ang kanilang pagkaintindi, their money, their time, and number concepts, and self-direction. Alin pa yung mga naaapektuhan? Ang kanilang social skills, their interpersonal skills, their social responsibility, their self-esteem. Bumababa yung tingin nila sa sarili for the reason na maraming pwedeng nabubuli or pwedeng napagsasabihan. Gullibility, naivete or the wariness, social problem solving, and the ability to follow rules, obey laws, and to avoid being victimized. Another one is yung practical skills, activities of daily living, ang kanilang pang-araw-araw, yung kanilang personal care, the occupational skills, the healthcare, travel, transportation schedules, routine, safety, use of money, and use of the telephone. Another one is ito yung severity of ID based on the levels of intellectual functioning. So kapag mild ang kanyang IQ, 55 to 69. Pag moderate, 40 to 54. Pag severe, 25 to 39. And pag profound, IQ is below 25. So ano ba yung prevalence of intellectual disability? Intellectual disability is the most common developmental disability. Take note of the word most common. Approximately 6.5 million people in the United States have intellectual disability. And in the Philippines, sa ating bansa, intellectual disability comprises 7.02 of the total population of persons with disability. And that is based on the National Statistics Office Census last 2000. So ano ba yung etiology and classifications of intellectual disability? Ito'y dulot ng prenatal causes, ang kanilang pagsilang, the chromosomal disorders, yung may problema sa chromosomes, inborn errors of metabolism, developmental disorder of brain formation, yung nagkakaroon ng problema sa brain formation, and environmental influences. Sa perinatal causes naman, meaning in the middle, mayroong anoxia, which is may problema sa nung pagbubuntis, kulang ang oxygen, mayroong low birth weight, and syphilis and herpes simplex. Nagkaroon ng sakit ang kanyang nanay. Then yung postnatal naman, biological, psychosocial, child abuse, and neglect. So malaking bagay din ang child abuse, especially kung parati silang na abuse physically. Okay? So next is the prenatal causes, which is the chromosomal disorders. The chromosomal disorders, congenital intellectual disability ang nangyayari sa kanya, involve heart defects, mayroong sakit sa puso or depekto sa puso, mayroong hearing loss and abnormalities of fingers and hands. Then manifest self-injurious behavior. Then, another one is difficulty swallowing and sucking. May problema sa kanilang paglunok ng kanilang pagkain. Then, mababa ang kanilang kilo kapag sila ay pinanganak. Then, unusual facial features, mayroong deformities sa kanilang mukha. Then, hyperactive, aggressive, and repetitive movements. So another one in the chromosomal disorders, also referred to as trisomy 21, usually not an inherited condition. The most common type of chromosomal disorder, ito yung yung Down syndrome. Then it involves the anomaly at the 21st set of chromosomes. Then people with the Down syndrome exhibits unusual facial features and with broad hands with short fingers. So ang kanilang itsura ay iba at may mga maikling fingers. So another prenatal causes is sterility in men, okay, sa lalaki. Then may decreased IQ, poor coordination, skeletal abnormalities, and poor coordination. And that another example for this is the Klinefelter syndrome. Okay. So another is the chromosomal disorder. Minsan it inherits from the father, mula ito sa papa. Infants are lethargic and have difficulty eating but eventually become obsessed with food as they grow. Simula, there is a difficulty in eating, pero habang naglumalaki siya, nagkakaroon ng pagbabago. And the leading genetic cause of obesity, no? Usually ang mga may chromosomal disorders sa kanilang paglaki, nagkakaroon ng problema sa weight. People with Prader-Willi syndrome are at risk for variety and other health problems such as heart defects, kidney problems, and scoliosis. Yung problema sa likod, sa bones. Ano po? Then another one is the chromosomal disorders normally found in females. Karamihan naman ito ay sa babae. Persons with Turner syndrome has webbing of the neck, Yon, mayroong ano diyan, parang sobra or mayroong lumalapad and mayroong puffiness or swelling of the hands and feet. Yung parang namamaga na kamay at paa. Associated with heart defects and kidney problems. So another chromosomal disorders is the Williams syndrome, caused by the absence of material on the seventh pair of chromosomes. People with Williams syndrome exhibit heart defects and elfin facial features. Nababago ang kanilang itsura, no? Their unusual sensitivity to sound makes them competent in music and language despite of their low IQ level. So yan ang and another chromosomal disorders in prenatal causes, the fragile X syndrome, most common known hereditary cause of intellectual disability. Ito din yung common na alam associated with X chromosomes in the 23rd pair of chromosomes. So occurs less often in females, kaunti sa mga babae. Most commonly, it happened to male. Persons with fragile X syndrome have behavior and emotional problems in poor socialization skills. Takot silang makisalamuha sa ibang tao. Takot silang makihalubilo. They become more anxious when returns are changed and they have unusual facial features. Yan. So may kakaibang itsura din. Pagdating naman sa inborn errors of metabolism, commonly is the galactosemia, inability of the body to use simple sugar galactose. Yan. And Hunter syndrome, defective breakdown of chemical mucopolysaccharide. And the phenylketonuria or the PKO, the phenylketonuria, inability of the body to convert phenylalanine to tyrosine. Okay, and the Tay-Sachs disease, absence of hex-A enzyme. Ano bang gagawin? Can be prevented through an early detection. Kaya nga po sa mga bagong silang, nagkakaroon sila ng tinatawag na newborn screening para ma-detect kung anong problema ng bata and can be treated by providing a special diet program. So, developmental disorders of brain formation. Kailan naman ito? Nagkakaroon ng developmental disorders of brain formation. The intellectual disability usually ranges from severe to profound, and there's no specific treatment, and life expectancy is low. Meaning, ang may mga microcephalus ay mababa ang chance na tumagal sila sa mundo. Yan. So, hindi siya ano din. Ito din yung common na nakikita natin na mayroong developmental disorders in brain formation, ang hydrocephalus. Results from an accumulation of cerebrospinal fluid inside or outside the brain, and the degree of intellectual disability depends on how early the condition is diagnosed and treated. Okay, bakit lumalaki usually ang kanilang ulo? Because of fluid, okay, sa loob ng utak. Then, ano naman yung environmental influences kung bakit mayroong learning disability? Maternal malnutrition and infection. So sometimes po, kapag kulang sa nutrition ang nagbubuntis, tendency ay nauuwi sa learning disability ng kanyang anak kasi wala itong nakukuhang nutrients inside the womb. Fetal alcohol syndrome kapag mahilig din ang babae sa alak, then nagkakaroon ng lead exposure, illicit drug exposure kapag nagdodroga, exposure to radiation. Kaya that's why po, usually ang mga buntis ay hindi nagkakaroon ng x-ray or ano muna for the reason na they will be exposed to radiation. And the German measles, which is the rubella. So, nung ano na siya, perinatal causes na po, nagkakaroon ng deprivation of oxygen, konti lang yung oxygen, then low birth weight, hindi tama ang kanyang timbang, and nagkaroon ng sakit ang kanyang nanay na syphilis and herpes simplex. So, postnatal causes is the environmental and psychosocial problems. Ano naman ito? Nutritional problems, pagkulang ang nutrients na nakukuha ng bata. So that's why po sa kanyang murang edad pa lamang ay bigyan siya ng tamang nutrisyon para lumaki siya ng maayos at mayroong tamang learning abilities. adverse living conditions dahil ito sa sitwasyon natin ngayon na talagang mahirap at na mabuhay, mahirap po. Then we have inadequate health care and lack of early cognitive stimulation. Then the environmental and psychosocial problem also is the child abuse and neglect. Kapag ano din po sila, kapag biktima sila ng pang-aabuso, pag biktima sila ng negligence, then traumatic brain injury, nagkaroon siya ng sakit sa pag-iisip dahil po sa trauma, dahil po sa mayroong na-injured ang kanyang utak. Meningitis or encephalitis and lead poisoning. Okay, next is the placement program for persons with intellectual disabilities. Ang kailangan natin is kapag ang bata ay mayroong intellectual disability, ay kailangan po siyang makapasama sa inclusion programs. That's why ang Department of Education nowadays ay mayroon silang inclusion programs or inclusive education. Educational placement program for children with moderate to severe. They have the curriculum and materials for these children should be age appropriate. So karamihan naman ngayon ang ginagamit natin ngayon ay developmentally appropriate to the child. An individualized education program, di ba sinabi ko na to before, na mayroong modification sa curriculum, then behavior therapy program may also be employed as the very useful in altering behavior than the alternative programs among these children. So, yung sa early childhood, unlike preschool programs for children at risk, in which the goal is to prevent intellectual disability from occurring, programs for infants and preschoolers who are already identified with intellectual disability are designed to help them achieve as a high cognitive level as possible. So, kailangan po na sa murang edad pa lang, sa murang ano pa lang nila, ay maagapan na natin ang learning disabilities. So these programs give more emphasis on conceptual and language development and usually involves speech and physical therapies, most especially when children have multiple disabilities. So kaya nga po ini-encourage natin na sa murang edad pa lang nila ay bigyan na natin ng solusyon kasi especially kailangan talaga ng mahal, expensive because kailangan nito ng session sa therapist para matulungan yung bata. Then transition to adulthood, most authorities agree that although the degree of emphasis on transition programming should be greater for older than for younger students, as programming should begin in the elementary years. So nagsisimula sa kanyang elementary years. So another transition program for individuals involves two related areas. First, community adjustment to acquire a number of self-help skills. So let us help them also na maging independent through the guidance. Pero sometimes yung mga learning disabilities, kailangan talaga dyan masipag at matyaga ang magulang. Ano po? And second, employment to lead to a meaningful job. So even po may mga ganyan silang itsura, may mga ganyan silang kalagayan or sitwasyon, still pwede silang makapagtrabaho kung halimbawa magkaroon sila ng transition, magkaroon sila ng development in their situation. Then current researches about intellectual disabilities, mental retardation or intellectual disability, time for a conceptual change. Yan. Sexuality and sex education of adolescents with intellectual disability matters, attitudes, experience, and support needs. There is a big impact when it comes to the mother's care, mother's love, diba? Walang makakapantay sa pagmamahal ng magulang. That's why they are growing. That's why they are developing because of mother's love, mother's care. Aggressive behavior in adults with intellectual disability. Then, young adults with mental retardations, their response to death, grief, and bereavement, and academic engagement of learners with moderate mental retardation through pictorial self-management and the video self-modeling. So nowadays, there is no impossible ano na because of the technology. We are using now technology and we are using now everything under ano din. Ano po, na pwede na nang magamit na makatulong sa mga bata. So these are the references in these presentations. Ano po? So thank you very much for watching and for listening. So hoping na makatulong po ito sa atin. So see you sa ating next session for the types of learners with special needs.